Hey guys, tonight we travel way back to a time when life was so difficult, so absurdly inconvenient that your average Tuesday could feel like medieval punishment. You're not a knight or a queen, don't flatter yourself. No, tonight you wake up as a dirt-smeared peasant in a forgotten village, tucked somewhere between a damp forest and a muddy path nobody ever finishes paving. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the smoke already has. You open your eyes, immediately coughing. Not because you're sick yet, but because your home, a one-room timber, hovel with gaps wider than your mouth, is filled with the acrid smoke of last night's fire. There's no chimney, of course. Why waste good construction on something fancy like that? The smoke just floats around the room until it finds your lungs. You're lying on a straw mattress that would politely be called half-rotten, and that movement you just felt near your feet. Yeah, that wasn't your imagination. A rat is nibbling on your toes, probably confused about whether you're food or just in its way. Either way, it's not apologizing. You try to sit up. The stiff ache in your back reminds you that medieval sleep is a contact sport. Every part of your body seems to be arguing with your decision to exist today. But it's not like you can hit snooze. There are no clocks, just an inner sense of doom and a rooster with an overdeveloped work ethic. The smell hits next smoke, urine, unwashed bodies, and the vague tang of mouldy hay. You might call it the Eau de 1347. You think about stretching, but realize your arm is stuck to your tunic, sweat and burlap. Do that after a night of tossing and itching. Outside, your neighbor's baby is already crying. The chickens are flapping wildly, probably because the family goat snuck into the hut again. And through the wooden slats, you hear the telltale squelch of boots in muck. Someone's up before you. That's bad. Medieval villages don't reward lateness, they punish it. As you fumble to get up, your bare foot sinks into something squishy. You hope it's just yesterday's spilled porridge. Hope is the only thing you have left at this point. That and tetanus. You shuffle to the small wooden table, hoping to pour a little water from the cracked jug. But surprise, it's frozen solid. Just another delightful perk of living in a house that has the insulation properties of a loaf of bread. You peer out the small hole someone once called a window. It's covered in animal skin instead of glass. Glass being something only rich people, monasteries or imaginary friends possess. The village looks as dismal as ever. Muddy paths, crooked cottages, and smoke curling out of every gap like the place is trying to exhale its own misery. And this is just the beginning. You haven't even gotten to the part of the day where your lord might accuse you of stealing a goose, or your neighbor suspects you of consorting with forest spirits because you picked a mushroom that looked funny. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Invite viewers to post their location and local time. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grab your woolen hood, moth-bitten and half-soaked from yesterday's rain, and take your first step outside. The mud grabs your foot like it wants to keep you here forever. And it might. Because today, in this medieval little world, you'll be lucky to make it to lunch without injury, offense, or insult. Welcome to the Middle Ages. You're already late. You shuffle through the sludge like someone escaping a slow-motion avalanche made of manure. The morning air bites at your cheeks and your breath fogs like steam from a boiling cauldron. Not that you've ever seen one, those belong to the Lord's kitchen. Your version of luxury. A twig. Yes, a twig. Because now it's time to tackle your next medieval challenge, dental hygiene. You might call it a morning routine. They would have called it survival of the gums. There's no sink, no running water, and definitely no peppermint toothpaste. Instead, you pluck a small stick from beneath the woodpile, chew one end into a frayed brush, and then, if you're feeling fancy, dip it into a pinch of salt or ashes. It tastes like old fire and misery. You work it across your teeth, which already feel like they've been on the receiving end of too many hard crusts and too few vegetables. You haven't seen a toothbrush, let alone a dentist. In fact, the village barber is also the tooth puller. He sharpens his blade with the same whetstone he uses on his sheep shears, and doesn't wash his hands between customers or species. No wonder most people in town are already missing several molars by your age, which might be around 20, though no one is really counting. You're just old enough to carry stuff and not die immediately. You spit the salt paste into the dirt and wipe your mouth on your sleeve, which does absolutely nothing since your sleeve is actually dirtier than your mouth. Next up, your daily dose of medieval social anxiety. You glance around to make sure no one saw you using the fancy salt for your teeth. If someone noticed, they might report it to the reeve, who could accuse you of wasting food or witchcraft depending on his mood. Privacy is not a medieval luxury. You're surrounded by suspicious eyes, leaky walls, and people who believe sneezing is spiritual weakness. And speaking of sneezing just your luck, you let one out. A full-body awkward explosion of noise and mucus. Immediately, a nearby old woman glares at you like you just murdered her cat. You nod politely, but she spits near your feet anyway, muttering something about bad omens. Charming. To lighten your spirits, you consider asking your neighbor how she's doing, but she's busy picking lice out of her child's hair using a butter knife and doesn't look like she wants to chat. That's fine. You're not exactly feeling social either. Your body aches like it's been lightly flattened by a wagon wheel, and your stomach grumbles ominously. Time for food. You return inside, hoping someone left you a bit of yesterday's gruel. You find a wooden bowl with a cold grey lump stuck to the bottom. You sniff it. It's vaguely sour, which means it's safe. Sour means fermented, and fermentation is your best shot at not dying. You take a bite. It's gritty cold and oddly chewy, probably because there's ground-up chaff or pebbles in it. You chew slowly, trying not to chip a tooth. This is your breakfast. Again. While you chew, you ponder the idea of nutrition, which didn't technically exist yet. No one counts calories or tracks protein. Your food pyramid is a single line pointing toward whatever's edible. Experts still debate whether medieval villagers were actually underfed or just horribly malnourished. But judging by your current bowl of gritty sadness, it's safe to assume both. The lucky ones had gardens. You're still waiting for something to sprout in your weed patch. As you finish your last bite of cold sorrow, you realize you have to use the bathroom, which is complicated. There are no indoor toilets, not even close, and you didn't make it to the outhouse before the other families. So now you face a choice squat behind the hut and hope no one sees you or use the chamber pot, also known as a splintery wooden bowl of doom. It hasn't been emptied since yesterday, possibly the day before that. You hold your breath and pick the lesser evil. As you do, the pot sloshes unexpectedly. And you know what? Let's skip that part. Some medieval experiences are too graphic even for bedtime. And yet as you stumble back to your doorway trying to ignore the stench of your own survival, you hear something strange. A faint giggle. Is someone laughing at you? Yes, your neighbor's goat. It's staring at you from across the muddy lane, chewing rhythmically, and somehow judging your entire existence. You lock eyes with it. It blinks once. You lose. Whisper 1 in the comments below if this tale charms your heart, or 2 if it sends shivers down your spine. And with that humiliation complete, you begin to gather your tools for the day's labor. Because as rough as your morning has been, the real punishment is just beginning. You're not entirely sure how it's only mid-morning because your body feels like it's lived 3 full lifetimes already. And yet, here you are strapping on a leather belt that's too cracked to be useful, slinging a rust-pitted hoe over your shoulder and heading toward the fields like some kind of mud-covered tragic hero. If you were hoping for a change of scenery, you'll be disappointed. The fields look exactly like the rest of the village, brown, uneven, and soggy in all the wrong places. The road there is less a path, and more a series of moist surprises, where every step risks either twisting your ankle or losing a shoe. And you do lose a shoe. Instantly. It disappears into the muck with a wet schlorp, leaving you hopping for balance. You reach in after it, pulling it out along with something that may or may not be alive. You slap it off. Doesn't matter. The important part is you still have something on your foot. That's a win by medieval standards. By the time you reach your assigned plot, the sun is already burning through the low-hanging mist, and your woolen tunic has begun to trap your sweat like a sponge made of misery. You wipe your brow, which does nothing because your sleeve is wetter than your face. And now it's time to begin what medieval people did best, back-breaking labor for someone else's benefit. Today's task, turning the soil. Sounds romantic in theory. In reality, it means hacking at stubborn rock-laced earth with a wooden-handled tool so dull it could be mistaken for a spoon. You jab, dig, grunt, and repeat. A rhythm develops, one that slowly convinces your spine that it's made of gravel. As your muscles begin their slow, inevitable rebellion, you reflect on a mainstream historical fact. Medieval peasants worked every day but Sunday, often from sunrise to sunset, often without proper shoes, brakes, or anything resembling dignity. Your lord, safely asleep in his manor, might reward you with a crust of bread if you finish early, but he also might ignore you entirely. That's the gamble. Oh, and speaking of gambles, rain. The clouds begin to gather in the distance, grumbling like a medieval noble denied his third wine goblet. You look around for shelter. There is none. You're in a field. The only structure nearby is a wooden scarecrow missing half its head, which now leans drunkenly like it's given up on scaring anything including birds. You keep digging. Your fingers blister. Your feet go numb. And just when you're thinking things can't get worse, someone shouts your name. It's the Reeve, the Lord's steward, local enforcer, and full-time joy vacuum. He stomps toward you, red-faced and puffing like a man whose entire personality is shaped by yelling at others before lunch. You're late, he growls, though you've been digging for over an hour. You open your mouth to protest, but he raises his walking stick, more of a hitting stick really, and taps it warningly against his palm. You nod, bite your tongue, and return to your work. Congratulations! You've just been punished for not suffering fast enough. Scholars remain divided on whether medieval labourers were truly as oppressed as folklore suggests, but there's little debate that their quality of life was brutally physical. Your body is learning that firsthand. Every muscle sings a mournful song, and your lower back has officially filed for divorce. And just as your hands start to cramp beyond repair, the Reeve adds a final gift to your morning misery. He tells you to shovel manure, specifically the enormous pile steaming in the corner of the pasture. You know what's in that pile. Cow, horse, possibly goat, possibly human, possibly worse. But you grab your pitchfork shoulders, sagging, and start the transfer anyway. The smell hits you like a bard's bad breath. You try to breathe through your mouth, which only makes it worse. Texture is now involved, and somewhere in the middle of your 7th or 8th shovel load a rooster flies into your head. Apparently it took offence at your proximity to its favourite dung pile perch. You stumble backward, nearly fall and land against the manure pile which squelches ominously under your weight. You want to scream, but you don't, because if you do, the Reeve might dock your already non-existent pay. Instead, you just close your eyes, take a deep, terrible breath, and keep working. Eventually the sun creeps higher, slapping you in the eyes with the subtlety of a drunk juggler. Sweat stings your skin like salt in an open wound, and your arms now feel less like limbs and more like medieval pudding, shaky hot and completely unsatisfying. You pause, hunched over your pitchfork back, crackling like old parchment. For a moment, you dare to look around at the dozen other villagers labouring alongside you. Everyone's in a similar state, bent, blistered, burnt, and possibly one sneeze away from spontaneous collapse. There's no camaraderie here, just mutual resignation and the occasional muttered curse about the Reeve's mother. And now, dear sleeper, comes the highlight of your day lunch. You trudge back toward the village, guided by the distant clang of a handbell and the irresistible fantasy that just maybe someone remembered to soak the barley last night. You pass the same squelchy path, wave weakly at the judgmental goat still chewing, still winning, and re-enter your smoky hovel. On the table is a wooden bowl with what looks like wet cardboard in it. Congratulations, it's bread. Or what passes for bread here. Dense, stale, and more stone than loaf. It's so hard you could chip flint off it. You chew slowly, carefully. One wrong bite, and you're heading straight to the tooth puller, who also makes candles, and occasionally men's trousers. Next to the bread is a scoop of something vaguely resembling vegetable stew. If you squint, you can see bits of cabbage, maybe a carrot, possibly a pebble. The broth is more of a suggestion than a liquid thick, lukewarm and speckled with mystery. Still, your stomach growls like a caged boar, so you eat it anyway. The taste bland with subtle notes of despair. There's a piece of something chewy in the mix. You don't ask questions. Survival means not knowing. And then as you're halfway through chewing what may or may not be turnip skin, the village priest wanders in. No knocking, no announcement. Just opens the door and steps into your one-room life like he owns the place, which in some theological sense he kind of does. He nods at your bowl, sniffs and mutters, "You've been blessed with plenty." Then just like that, he drops a folded cloth on your table and walks out. Inside is a note. Reminder. Tithe is due tomorrow. You stare at it. You stare at your bowl. You consider tithing the bowl and the spoon. Still chewing, you step outside for air, which naturally smells like a mix of livestock and mild despair. But as you lean against the doorframe trying to remember what a normal day ever felt like, a child runs past, screaming with laughter, covered in mud, and wielding a stick like a sword. For a moment you almost smile. Then a chicken bites your toe, Tap 3 in the comments below if this story makes you smile, or 4 if it leaves you chilled, because here comes the afternoon shift, and no, there's no nap scheduled. Rest time is a luxury reserved for saints and nobility. You, meanwhile, are expected back in the field this time to help dig a new drainage ditch because the old one was haunted, or more accurately, collapsed. The ditch is wide, rocky, and already smells like yesterday's misfortunes. You and 2 others are handed spades, one of which is broken and told to make it functional by sundown. No pressure. One of the men groans audibly. The other just starts digging in silence, possibly out of habit, possibly because he's forgotten how to do anything else. You follow their lead, squatting into the trench with all the enthusiasm of a frog headed for stew. Dirt flies, rocks scrape your knees, and at one point a worm ends up in your ear. You try not to panic. Everyone pretends not to notice. Experts still debate whether medieval peasants truly lacked downtime, or whether seasonal rhythms allowed for some reprieve. But if today is any indication, you'll be lucky to die of exhaustion before anyone thinks to give you a break. Eventually your muscles begin to shake again, not from effort, but from hunger returning for a rematch. The sun starts to dip behind the trees, casting long, sticky shadows across the field. Someone offers you a swig of ale, and though it tastes like goat breath and vinegar, you gulp it anyway. Just enough to numb your mouth, not enough to forget the ditch. And the worst part, you still have evening chores. As the shadows lengthen and the air begins to cool just barely, you trudge back to the village with your spine bent like an old bow. The muscles in your arms throb in time with your heartbeat, and the soles of your feet feel like they've been personally cursed by an over-enthusiastic monk. But rest. Not yet. Because now it's time for evening chores, which sounds deceptively quaint, like you'll be trimming hedges or lighting candles. You won't. You'll be chasing cows. Your neighbour's livestock has once again escaped because medieval fencing is really just a suggestion made of twine and broken ambition. You're handed a crooked stick pointed in the general direction of the woods and told, "Go find Berta." You assume Berta is a cow. You hope Berta is a cow. You squelch across the soggy village green, calling her name like a confused bard. "Berta. Come on, girl. Here, Berta." A few villagers chuckle. Someone claps sarcastically. You find hoofprints leading toward the edge of the trees. Excellent. You follow them, and there she is, chewing calmly in a thicket half covered in brambles, utterly unconcerned with your personal suffering. You approach cautiously, speaking in soft tones. "Nice, Berta. Good cow. Let's go home, shall we?" She looks at you, snorts and bolts in the opposite direction. You sigh deeply. Your stick is no match for Berta's sense of purpose. Eventually, after 20 minutes of cow diplomacy and one accidental face-first trip into a bush, you manage to coax her back to the pasture. She steps on your foot. Twice. But you don't cry because your tears dried up sometime around the mid-morning manure shift. Back at the pen, another chore awaits, fetching water. That means a half-mile walk with a wooden yoke and 2 heavy buckets, unless one is cracked, which it usually is. You hoist the buckets over your shoulders, wobbling like a drunk marionette, and head for the village well. At the well, there's already a line. A woman with 6 children, a man missing his teeth, and someone who's either asleep or very, very patient. The line doesn't move fast. One of the children screams the entire time. A chicken pecks your shin. The well smells faintly of mildew and goat. Eventually you fill your buckets. You spill some on your shirt. You spill some on your foot. You spill some down your leg, which somehow attracts a curious frog. You don't ask questions. You just walk home. And that's when you notice your clothes are crawling. Lice. Again. It's the itchy reminder that your tunic hasn't been washed in. You don't even know how long. Laundry is a once-in-a-while thing usually done in the river, and only when the smell starts making other people dizzy. You scratch discreetly, but the itching only gets worse. You tell yourself it's character building. Fun fact, scholars remain divided on how widespread lice infestation really was in day-to-day peasant life, but your skin doesn't care. Right now your shirt feels like it's hosting a flea circus. You try to ignore it. It doesn't work. You reach your home and dump the water into the household barrel, which leaks slightly at the base, but still manages to hold most of it. You wipe your hands on your tunic again, futile, and collapse onto the nearest stool, which creaks under your weight like it too has given up. Someone knocks on the door. You consider pretending you're not home, but it opens anyway. It's your cousin who needs help mending a fence. Of course, because the cows got out. Again. You glance at the sliver of light left in the sky. Consider how much dignity you're willing to lose today, and then stand up slowly. Your knees crackle like firewood. You grab a hammer. The handle is splintered. Your hand is already bleeding from earlier, but you've stopped keeping track. Together, you and your cousin patch the fence using string-bent nails and an impressive amount of profanity. The cows watch unimpressed, and as the stars begin to twinkle overhead, barely visible through the low-hanging smoke of cook fires, you finally stumble home for the second time. Fingers, raw feet cracked, and your shirt actively hostile. Dinner's waiting. Unfortunately, you re-enter your hovel with all the grace of a broken scarecrow and immediately trip over the threshold. Because, of course, the floor is uneven, and that same rock that stubbed your toe yesterday has returned for an encore performance. Dinner is already served. Sort of. There's a bowl on the table, steaming faintly, and that's usually a good sign. Steam means it was heated recently even. But when you get closer, you realize the scent wafting from the pot is not promising. It's cabbage. Again. Not the crisp kind. No, this is boiled down to a mushy green swamp, with mystery bits floating in it. Maybe turnip, maybe bark, maybe some poor soul's lost sandal. You sit down and stare into the bowl like it's a scrying pool. It stares back. Your family or housemates' definitions are vague, slurp away contentedly. Someone farts. No one acknowledges it. You take a cautious bite. It's hot, which is something, but it also tastes like someone whispered the idea of vegetables into water and then forgot to add salt. You reach for a piece of bread, if it can still be called that. It's more of a stale brick, the kind that could legally qualify as a building material. You gnaw off a chunk, nearly lose a molar, and soak it in the stew until it resembles sadness soup. This is the evening meal. No courses, no dessert. No drink pairing unless you count the cloudy water in the corner jug, which you're pretty sure has things growing in it. Not anything dangerous, just fuzzy. Across from you, one of the kids is chewing with his mouth open and asking if people really eat fruit every day in the capital. You nod. Slowly, chewing your own cud of cabbage, sorrow, and murmur. They say oranges can heal you. Everyone laughs. Oranges are basically unicorns here. You'd kill for a grape. While you're still working through the last spoonful, you notice something odd about your meat. Is it meat? It's stringy, tough, and there's hair. Not fur. Hair. Human-looking. You stop chewing and place it quietly back in the bowl. Your stomach is too tired to argue. Here's your quirky tidbit hair in medieval stew. Wasn't always a mistake. Sometimes it meant you got the cheapest cuts, including skin hide or things scraped off the butcher's table after the dogs were done. Bon appetit. You wash it down with a sip of ale, the only reliable beverage available. It's warm, watery, and brewed in someone's bathtub. But at least it won't give you dysentery like the well water. Probably. Small victories. The conversation around the table turns to a recent hanging cheery. Apparently someone stole eggs. You nod solemnly, wondering if one of those eggs ended up in your stew. You hope not. It tasted more like pigeon. As the meal winds down, someone mentions the upcoming tithe, and a collective groan passes through the room like a plague breeze. 10% of your harvest, your money, your anything. If it exists, the church wants a slice. You're already down to your last sock. What's next? Tithing your lice. You scrape the bottom of your bowl, not so much for food, but to feel productive. The wooden spoon has a crack in it. The table wobbles. The candle sputters. And just when you think you'll finally get a minute to breathe, someone hands you a stack of firewood and asks you to restock the hearth. You want to say no. You want to lie down and become one with the floor. But you nod because saying no gets you talked about. And being talked about is how people end up tied to stakes or dunked in ponds. You shuffle outside the cool air, wrapping around you like a damp blanket. The stars above are clearer now, tiny silver pinpricks in an otherwise smudged sky. The firewood pile is damp, mouldy, and home to exactly one too many beetles. You pick up a bundle and carry it inside, ignoring the crunching sound near your fingers. You toss it by the hearth where someone pokes at the coals like they're coaxing a ghost to life. You sit nearby, palms out. The warmth is weak, but it's enough. And for a brief moment, just as your eyes begin to droop and your body melts toward the fire, someone knocks over the chamber pot. It spills. Everyone groans. Someone throws a rag at it. You lie back and close your eyes. You do not sleep yet, but you dream of oranges. Morning's bruises are still fresh on your body, But now evening has its own plans for punishment. You're curled near the hearth, eyes half shut, and the world has begun to blur in that woozy, almost sleep way when suddenly the door slams open with a gust of wind and a shout. It's the bailiff, and he's angry. Again. He stomps in with boots still wet from the muck, and breath that smells like sour ale and poor decisions. His cloak flaps behind him like a vulture's wing. Everyone in the room freezes, including the fire, which crackles more quietly out of fear. You, he barks, pointing at you like you just cursed the bishop's ox. You were supposed to deliver kindling this afternoon. Lord Edmund's chamber was cold. You blink. You have no memory of this task because no one told you about it. Or maybe they did. Or maybe you were waist-deep in a cow trench at the time. Doesn't matter. You try to explain, but all that comes out is a tired wheeze that sounds like a guilty confession. The bailiff slaps his leather gloves together dramatically and mutters something about lazy hands. You half expect him to draw a sword, but instead he just stomps over, raps his knuckles on your forehead, and storms back out, grumbling that you owe the manor an extra day's labour next week. And just like that, your upcoming rest day disappears into the void. Sleep is cancelled. Again. Now your body truly aches. Your shoulders throb like someone filled them with river stones, and your legs are jelly barely held together with bruises. You shuffle back toward your straw mat, still warm, still mildly rat-occupied, and collapse face first. Just as you drift off, you hear the telltale clatter of the chamber pot again. This time, it's the toddler. The splash is louder. The smell arrives faster. You try to ignore it. You fail. You consider sleeping outside. But outside is worse. Outside has thieves. Let's take a moment to appreciate the paradox of medieval law and order. Scholars remain divided on just how effective local constables were, but most agree that for peasants, being accused of a crime was often more dangerous than committing one, especially when the crime in question was existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like last week when the tanner's apprentice got caught walking home with a sack of bread crusts and spent 2 nights in the stocks while children threw onions at him. He lost a tooth. Not from the onions, just from sitting there too long. You lie awake staring at the flickering shadows on the ceiling. Your tunic itches in new places. A flea hops onto your cheek. You flick it off and miss. It disappears into the straw, probably laughing. From the road outside, you hear a group of drunk men singing a ballad about a pig who became a bishop. It's oddly catchy. Then one of them retches loudly and they stumble on. You sit up slowly. Your bladder is screaming. So here's the eternal medieval dilemma. Do you go outside and risk freezing, stepping in something foul, or being mistaken for a witch? Or do you use the chamber pot and risk a splashback that might haunt you forever? You grab the pot. The floor creaks. The rats shift. You do what you have to do. It is neither fast nor graceful. You settle back down, heart pounding slightly from the indignity of it all. But just before your eyes close, the bell rings. Once. Twice. Low and distant. It's the village church signaling a death, or a fire, or maybe just reminding everyone to pray. Medieval bells were ambiguous like that. No context, just doom in D minor. You pull your blanket up, if you can call it that. It's more like a sheet of damp wool pretending to be useful, and bury your face in the scratchy straw. And that's when a voice whispers near your window. Spare some broth. It's the beggar again. The one who lives in the woods, and only comes out when he smells stew. No one knows his name. Some say he used to be a monk. Others say he's a ghost. Either way, no one wants to be the first to open the door. You freeze. You do not move. He shuffles away. Your eyes drift shut at last, but even as sleep comes, your body still itches your back, still hums, and your stomach still wonders whether cabbage qualifies as food or punishment. Welcome to bedtime in medieval times. The only dream here is waking up less itchy than yesterday. You awaken the next morning, not gently, not with birdsong or warm sunbeams, but with a loud thwack on the door and the unmistakable voice of your neighbour yelling, "Get up! The pigs are out again. It's not even light yet." You blink into the grey haze of pre-dawn mouth, dry body, stiff eyes, gritty. You were just asleep, just. But that doesn't matter. Medieval mornings do not care about your feelings. You roll off your straw mat, immediately greeted by the crunch of something under your hip. You don't look. You don't want to know. There's something wet in your sleeve. Possibly dew, possibly rat-related. Either way, you shiver. Outside chaos. 2 pigs are rampaging through the lane, knocking over buckets, rooting through a sack of barley, and terrifying a cluster of geese. One of the pigs is enormous, like a boar with ambition, and it's charging at a cabbage cart as though it's reenacting a siege. You join a small team of bleary-eyed villagers with sticks and shouts trying to corral the beasts. The pigs, of course, do not cooperate. One of them slips through your legs. The other barrels into a chicken coop, creating a squawk-filled explosion of feathers and panic. You scream. The pig grunts. You both lock eyes, and for a moment, you genuinely believe it's mocking you. Eventually, after a full-body mudslide and a heroic dive that leaves you smelling of wet straw and regret, the pigs are secured. You're rewarded with a grunt of approval and half a stale biscuit. You eat it anyway. It tastes like dust and disappointment, but also strangely victory. And now your actual workday begins. Your first job: helping a carpenter repair the church roof, which recently lost several shingles during what people are calling a mild wind. You saw that wind. It uprooted a fence and flung a goat into a pond. You climb a crooked ladder that sways with every breath, gripping your tools like they're sacred relics. Up here the view is actually beautiful. You can see the whole village, its thatched roofs curling chimney smoke, the worn footpaths winding toward the woods. But don't enjoy it too long. Because this roof is steep, your shoes have no grip, and the shingles are basically just brittle wooden wafers nailed into rotting beams. You inch forward, heart pounding. Then the carpenter, whose left eye twitches whenever he speaks, shouts, "Careful there, that one's cursed." He laughs, but you're not sure he's joking. Medieval humor is ambiguous. You nail a board into place with a crooked iron spike while your toes grip the roof like terrified squirrels. The carpenter shares a story about how the last guy who slipped off this roof only broke some of his parts. You don't ask for details. Eventually your shift ends when a sudden gust nearly sends you flying. You crawl down the ladder like it's made of glass and kiss the dirt silently, and only once. Your clothes are dusty, your knees are bleeding again, and your hands have developed the beginnings of what will certainly be deeply unromantic calluses. You feel like a sack of lentils someone threw off a cart. But hey, it's time for a midday wash. You shuffle down to the stream where laundry bathing and livestock drinking all happen within spitting distance of each other. You splash water on your face and instantly regret it. It's freezing. It also smells faintly of goose. You scrub the worst of the grime off with a rag that used to be a sock, while a group of women nearby chat about someone being cursed with bad breath and a wandering eye. You try not to eavesdrop. You fail. One of them glances at you. You quickly pretend to be very invested in cleaning your elbow. Here's a historical fun fact: cleanliness standards in medieval villages were wildly inconsistent. Some places bathed weekly, others only during holy festivals. And most people couldn't afford more than one change of clothes, which meant you wore your filth like a second skin. Experts still debate whether medieval peasants were truly filthy or just differently clean. From your current position, half-bathed in goose water while a leech floats by, you vote for filthy. As you dry your face with a burlap scrap, a sudden bell rings. It's not a death bell this time, it's a summons. The reeve wants everyone in the town square. You sigh deeply. Your bones creak. You've already been trampled by pigs, insulted by shingles, and baptized in poultry runoff. And now you're being summoned. Again. The bell keeps ringing as you limp toward the town square, still dripping from your awkward half-bath. You pass the blacksmith's forge, where a boy no older than 10 is pumping the bellows, while his master shouts encouragement that sounds more like military orders. The air smells of singed iron and sweat. Not unpleasant, at least, compared to what's under your nails right now. You arrive in the square along with a dozen other villagers, all of whom look as battered as you feel. The reeve stands atop a wooden crate, arms crossed, jaw tight. You brace for bad news, because when the reeve rings the bell, it's rarely to compliment anyone's turnip-growing abilities. "Right, listen up," he barks, scanning the crowd with the joyless intensity of someone who hasn't smiled since the last coronation. "There's been an incident." He pauses for dramatic effect. You shift your weight from one aching foot to the other. The Lord's tax cart was found upended, in the marsh road, contents missing. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd, followed by awkward shuffling. Someone whispers bandits. Someone else mutters ghosts. You know better. It was probably that ambitious pig. The reeve raises his hands. Until we find the thief or thieves, everyone's tithe will be increased. A groan escapes the group, almost melodic in its despair. You're already giving 10% of your nothing. Now you'll owe 15% of less than that. It's a mathematical tragedy. You do the numbers in your head, realize they equal hunger, and immediately stop doing math. A woman raises her hand boldly. What if we don't know anything? The Reeve smiles. It's not a kind smile. Then pray someone confesses. He jumps down, brushing dirt off his cloak like it's peasant repellent, and stalks off toward the manor. The crowd disperses in silence, shoulders sagging. You stand there for a moment, staring at the muddy wooden platform where your future just got more expensive. Then someone claps you on the back, a heavy thudding slap, and says, "Lucky us, eh?" You nod. Living the dream, you trudge back toward your hut, mentally rearranging your already non-existent resources. Maybe you can trade the last of your dried onions for some oats. Maybe your cousin still has a sack of barley hidden under the floorboards. Maybe you can learn to eat moss. On the way you pass the village priest, who offers a smile and a blessing. Hard times, he murmurs. But the Lord provides. You consider asking if the Lord takes IOUs. Here's a fun scholarly tidbit. The overlap between religious obligation and economic survival was razor thin for most medieval peasants. Experts still debate whether clergy were spiritual leaders or just finely dressed tax collectors. Either way, they were very good at reminding you to give, even when you had nothing to spare. Back at home, you gather the bits of coin and dried goods you have stashed away. A few buttons, half a candle, 3 wrinkled apples with questionable spots. You'll need to offer something soon, or risk being labelled a troublemaker. And being a troublemaker means stocks, or worse. You sigh and tuck everything back into the hidey hole beneath the floorboards. You'll figure it out later. Or you won't. Either way, there's still firewood to split. You find the axe leaning against the shed wall. It's duller than the stew from last night. You swing anyway. Each strike feels like your bones are coming apart, but you keep chopping because winter is always lurking, ready to sneak in through the cracks and freeze the hope right out of you. The sun begins to dip, bathing the village in golden light that does nothing to warm you. Your hands are blistered. Your knees are black with soot, and your stomach growls like a bear denied hibernation. But then, just as you drop the axe and lean on the stump, something miraculous happens. A loaf of real bread is placed gently on your doorstep. Warm, fresh, round. You blink, stunned. You glance around, but no one's there. No footsteps. No note. Just steam curling up, like a ghost of kindness. You pick it up reverently, inhaling the scent like it's sacred. It's the kind of bread with flavor baked by someone with both time and skill. You break off a small piece, let it melt in your mouth. It's soft. It's salty. It's beautiful. You might actually cry. Of course, your brain immediately suspects a trap. Did someone drop it by accident? Is it poisoned? Is it cursed? But you eat it anyway. Because in this world, mystery bread is better than no bread at all. You cradle the bread like it's a newborn. Warm, precious, and far too good for the life you currently lead. You eat slowly, carefully, savoring each bite like it's a holy relic. The crust is golden and just crisp enough to remind you that, yes, flavor is real, and yes, there are things in life better than boiled cabbage. You don't tell anyone about the bread. Not because you're selfish, though, let's be honest, maybe a little, but because the moment anyone sees you with something this delightful, there will be questions and accusations, and possibly the Reeve demanding donations to the manor pantry. So instead you wrap the remaining half in a piece of cloth and hide it under your bedstraw next to the more questionable pieces of flint and that sock you still swear you'll wash one day. But the moment of peace doesn't last, because now it's time for the village meeting, which, in theory, is a democratic gathering of concerned townsfolk. In reality, it's 2 angry men shouting about pigs, a priest trying to bless things that don't want blessing, and everyone else just trying to get home before dark. You drag your tired legs toward the central gathering area, technically a flattened patch of grass next to a hollowed-out tree stump someone once called a podium. The meeting begins with the village elder clearing his throat so loudly it could raise the dead. He waves a scroll dramatically, then squints at it like he's just remembered he's illiterate. Right then, he says, "First order of business, the new tax. Again." Groans ripple through the crowd like a breeze through damp laundry. Someone coughs meaningfully. A baby cries. A chicken lays an egg with perfect timing, as if to punctuate the universal despair. The elder continues. Also, the forest path to the mill has been blocked by something. Some say wolves, others say spirits. Either way, someone's got to go check. You look around at the crowd. Everyone is suddenly very interested in their shoes. The elder's eyes fall on you. Of course they do. Ah, he says. You look nimble. You don't look nimble. You look like you were dragged behind a wagon. Twice. But no one else volunteers. So guess who's going to investigate the haunted path? You. Armed with a torch, a blunt stick, and the vague hope that wolves don't like exhausted peasants, you set off toward the forest. The sun is low. The shadows are long. The path is uneven and smells like moss-wet bark and probably fear. You pass the edge of the wood and immediately regret every choice that's led you here. Trees loom like judgmental giants. Twigs snap underfoot. A bird screeches above you, and you nearly throw the stick in panic. Halfway down the path, you find the blockage, a massive tangle of branches, mud, and something that smells suspiciously like spoiled goat cheese. Probably just a landslide. But because this is the medieval period, and logic is a luxury, you whisper a quick apology to any potential forest spirits before clearing the debris. It takes longer than expected. You sweat. You grunt. You stab your foot on a hidden rock and mutter something that might technically qualify as a curse, though not a magical one. Probably. Finally, the path is clear. You turn to leave. And there it is. A pair of glowing eyes in the underbrush. You freeze. They blink. You blink. Then a snort. It's a pig. A pig. Berta. Again. She snorts once more, turns around and trots deeper into the forest like she owns it. You sigh. Whisper something unholy about swine in general, and begin the slow, shuffling journey home. When you arrive back in the village, the meeting is over. The fire is low. People are already retreating into their homes. No one thanks you. No one even notices. The elder is asleep on his stump, snoring like a thunderstorm. You head home, pull the bread from under your straw, and eat one more bite just to remind yourself that the world can still be kind in tiny, secret ways. You lie down, bones, groaning, eyes fluttering shut, and somewhere faintly you hear that same baby crying, the pig squealing, a drunk singing off-key, medieval lullabies just for you. You wake up before dawn again, not because of any noble sense of duty or inner alarm clock, but because something is crawling on your neck. You slap at it instinctively, fingers swatting straw and skin alike. It's gone. Or maybe it was never there. Maybe it was just a phantom itch brought on by yesterday's flea swarm, which is now upgraded to a full-blown colony in your tunic. Either way, you're awake now. Congratulations. The fire has long since gone out. The coals are nothing but soft grey ash. You breathe in the cold air and immediately regret it. Your nose feels like it's inhaling knives. Outside, it's still pitch black, save for a few early risers stumbling past with buckets, baskets, or expressions of absolute misery. You don't need to guess what's waiting for you today. Repairs. Not for your hut, no. That's a lost cause, but for the manor's fence, which apparently collapsed under the weight of 2 drunk sheep and a very enthusiastic dog. You slurp a bit of cold stew left in your bowl from last night, ignoring the thin film forming on the surface. It tastes like cabbage and sadness. Again, you bundle yourself into your stiff, damp outer tunic and head to the tool shed. You're handed a hammer with a handle that's more splinter than wood, and a pouch of bent nails. Someone grunts and points toward the manor hill. You nod. Words are wasted here. Grunts are the local dialect. As you hike up the slope, your boots squelch in the morning mud. Somewhere behind you, a rooster crows aggressively, as if it too hates everything. You arrive at the fence. It's worse than described. More of a fence memory than an actual structure. It's a chaotic mess of broken posts, trailing ropes, and one confused goose trapped inside the collapsed section. You free the goose. It bites you on the knuckle. You say something your ancestors would disapprove of. And then you begin your masterpiece of medieval carpentry, which, to be fair, is less about measuring angles and more about hammering nails until things stop falling down. You jam 2 posts into the ground, wedge a plank across them, and whack it into place like you're trying to make it forget its own purpose. The sun starts to rise slowly, bleeding gold across the rooftops. You pause for a moment to watch. It's actually kind of beautiful. The village in soft light smoke curling lazily from chimneys, a donkey yawning dramatically in the distance. Then your hammer slips and you slam your thumb. You don't scream, but you do invent a new sound, a sort of strangled whimper mixed with ancient Latin and mild betrayal. Your nail immediately turns purple. You suck on it like a wounded child. The goose laughs. Probably. Eventually you finish the fence well, sort of. It stands upright, wobbles only a little, and no longer has an animal trapped inside. That's a win. Just as you're preparing to leave, the manor steward approaches. A tall, thin man who always looks like he's just smelled spoiled cheese and isn't sure who to blame. He inspects your work, nods once, and says, "That'll do. You're still due for fasting penance, by the way." You blink. Fasting. "For what, yesterday's sneezing during Vespers," he replies, as if it's perfectly obvious. You want to argue, but this is medieval logic. If you sneeze during holy hours, it's either a demon, a sin, or indigestion. Either way, it's your fault. Here's your fringe historical tidbit. Penance in medieval times could be assigned for almost anything from breaking Lent to stepping on a consecrated floor with muddy boots. Scholars still debate whether these rules were enforced out of genuine piety or simply as a way to control poor villagers with too many opinions and not enough bread. Back at your hut, you dutifully skip breakfast. It's not too difficult since you didn't have anything to eat anyway. But still, fasting out of obligation feels different than fasting out of sheer emptiness. Like your stomach is extra offended. You try to distract yourself by mending a torn sleeve. The needle is bent, the thread is coarse, and your fingers are still shaking from the hammer incident. But after several minutes, and one accidental stab to the palm, you manage to close the hole. Outside bells chime again, calling you to communal prayer. You trudge toward the chapel with a few dozen others, filing into the drafty stone building that smells of mildew and incense. You kneel on the hard floor. The priest begins to chant. Your knees ache. Your back twitches. You try not to sneeze. The old woman beside you is already watching, ready to report you. Halfway through the sermon about humility and hard work, your stomach growls so loudly that 3 people glance over. One of them looks concerned. One looks judgmental. The third offers a crumb of bread, like you're a starving sparrow. You whisper a thank you and try not to cry. And just when you think the day might calm down, the priest says, "After service, we'll be collecting volunteers for the pest removal committee. Pest removal rats, or maybe spirits, or maybe just a really mean cat. No one knows. All you know is your name is already being whispered. After prayers, you barely make it 10 steps before the pest removal committee ropes you in literally. Someone hands you a burlap sack, another tosses you a bent club, and a third slaps a lantern into your chest like you're being sent into the underworld. Apparently the village bakery has rats, and they're not the timid storybook kind. These are battle-hardened, flour-dusted beasts with eyes full of vengeance and a taste for rye. You're not alone in this noble mission. Joining you are Willem, a man who once tried to marry a tree during a cider festival, and Anke, who claims to speak rat after spending one too many nights in the granary. You suspect she's joking, but she also carries a small stick she calls the negotiator, so maybe not. The 3 of you descend into the bakery cellar, which smells like yeast ash and something. Foul. Not rotten exactly, just ambiguous, like a smell caught between identities. The walls are damp, the ceiling low, and the lantern throws long, twitchy shadows that make everything look haunted. You hear the first skitter before you see anything. A whisper of movement, fast and low. Willem tenses. Anke whispers something in what she claims is rat dialect. You grip your sack like it's a holy relic and inch forward. Then bam, a flash of fur darts across your path. You swing wildly, miss, and nearly fall face first into a pile of flour bags. Willem takes a swing and hits a crate. The crate explodes in a burst of stale breadcrumbs. The rats vanish into the shadows, leaving only the sound of their tiny mockery. You spend the next hour chasing invisible foes, knocking over barrels, sneezing in the dust, and growing increasingly convinced that these rats are smarter than all 3 of you combined. Eventually you corner one, a chubby, smug-looking specimen, with a chunk of pastry still in its mouth. You trap it under the sack. It squeaks angrily. You cheer quietly. Historical note scholars remain divided on the true extent of rat infestations in medieval towns. While popular culture paints them as a plague-bearing army, evidence suggests some areas had ingenious methods of rodent control, cats, traps, or in your case, deeply reluctant volunteers with blunt instruments. You return topside triumphant, but flour-covered, with one live rat and a long list of bruises. The baker barely looks up from his dough. Good. Toss it in the river, he says, wiping his hands. No thank you. No bread reward. Just a nod toward the door. On your way out, Willem mumbles that he might keep the rat. Looks smart, he says. You don't ask follow-up questions. You stagger out into the afternoon light, blinking like a mole. Your body is sore, your clothes are dusted like sugar cookies, and your dignity is somewhere near the rats. But there's no time to rest, because next on the schedule, public punishment day. Every few weeks, the Reeve sets up stocks in the centre square for minor infractions, stealing turnips, speaking during prayer, whistling after dark. Today's unlucky villager is Edda, the midwife's cousin, who apparently insulted a noble's beard at last Sunday's fair. You join the gathering crowd, children chatter, the priest mutters a blessing. Edda's cousin is already locked in the stocks, red-faced and scowling. He hurls insults at pigeons just to stay entertained. Someone throws a soft clump of dung. It lands with a wet thwop. Laughter erupts. The man spits and shouts. You throw like a monk. This earns a bigger cheer. You don't participate. You just stand watching, wondering if this is justice or just group therapy with vegetables. Experts still debate whether public shaming truly reformed behavior or just reinforced social control. But one thing's certain, it was effective in uniting a bored crowd with a common target. The sun moves lower in the sky, casting long shadows. The children get bored and wander off. Eventually someone unlocks the stocks, and Edda's cousin limps away, trailing cabbage leaves and curses. You shuffle home again, feet dragging through the ruts of a road that refuses to improve. Inside, your hut smells of damp straw and singed candle wax. A rat, the small kind, scurries across your shelf. You salute it. Your hands shake from exhaustion. Your legs wobble. Your nose itches from flour residue. You sit on the edge of your mat and think about oranges again. Then you remember the bread. You lift the cloth slowly. It's still warm. Just kidding, it's cold and stiff now. But it's there. You tear off a piece and chew. It's still the best thing that's happened in 2 days. Outside, someone yells about a missing pig. Again, you close your eyes. You pretend not to hear. You must have managed an hour or 2 of sleep. Maybe 3, if you count the part where you were technically unconscious with your eyes open. Either way, you're jolted awake by shouting just outside your hut again. This time, it's more urgent. Less village chaos and more someone's about to get dunked. You stumble to the door, rubbing your eyes, tunic still stiff with yesterday's flour. Outside, a small crowd has gathered. At the centre stands Edwin the miller, red-faced, arms flailing as he tries to explain himself. I said she looked like a witch, not that she was one. Standing beside him, glaring so hard it could ignite firewood, is the butcher's wife. In her hand is a wooden ladle. It's unclear whether it's for soup or vengeance. Welcome to medieval gossip and social shaming, where a misplaced comment, a strange birthmark, or even just having too many cats can land you a starring role in the village's unofficial drama circuit. The Reeve is already there, arms folded, face solemn. There'll be a hearing, he declares, as if this is a royal courtroom and not a muddy patch beside a cabbage stall. You've seen this before. A few whispered rumours, a couple of strange glances, and boom, someone's tied to a chair above the ducking pond, defending their honour, while children chant rude rhymes. Fun fact, scholars remain divided on how frequently accusations of witchcraft occurred in everyday peasant life. The big trials came later in history, but village-level suspicions, oh, those were constant. If someone's cow died, or bread didn't rise, or someone had particularly thick eyebrows, someone somewhere was definitely a witch. You lean on your doorframe watching, as Edwin attempts to apologise only to be pelted with a stale turnip. It bounces off his shoulder and lands near your feet. You briefly consider saving it for stew. Just as the Reeve begins to escort Edwin away, the old woman down the lane yells, "I saw him talking to a toad last week." That seals it. Edwin's fate is tied to amphibious treason. The crowd disperses, gossip already swirling. You hear snippets. Always did have pointy ears. Sleeps too late for a godly man. Doesn't like onions, suspicious. You head back inside, stepping over your own uneven floor, which has begun to lean slightly left as if the house itself is just as tired as you are. You reach under the straw for your flint, intending to relight the hearth and warm some water, but instead of flint, your fingers brush something strange. A lump of wax. Candle remnants. You bring it to your nose. Soap. You blink. Real soap. Scented, even lavender maybe. Where did this come from, then you remember? Last midsummer, the tanner's daughter traded a single cake of soap for your help hauling barrels during the village fair. You'd tucked it away, swearing, to save it for a special moment. And now, after rats, goose water and flower ghosts, this qualifies. You fetch a tin basin, pour in water from your cracked jug and place it near the hearth. You warm it slowly, like performing a ritual. The soap sits beside you, modest and miraculous. You peel off your tunic, revealing a patchwork of bruises and scrapes that would make any battlefield proud. You dip the cloth in the water, lather the soap and finally wash. The smell is shocking. Not bad, just otherworldly. Like a meadow that hasn't been trampled. Your skin tingles. You scrub your arms, your face even behind your ears. The grime lifts away like regret. You stare into the water and see a face you haven't seen in weeks. Not clean exactly, but less haunted. This is a luxury, possibly even a crime. You dry off with a linen scrap and change into your good tunic, which is only moderately moth-eaten. You feel strange, too fresh. Like someone might accuse you of not suffering properly. And right on cue, someone knocks. It's the village priest. He takes one look at you, sniffs the lavender air, and says, "Are you perfumed?" You hesitate. Number. Soap. He raises an eyebrow like you've just confessed to sorcery, then mumbles something about pride before nodding and moving on. You close the door slowly. Medieval self-care is dangerous territory. Here's your quirky tidbit. While bathing was sometimes discouraged by clergy, something about nakedness and temptation. Many villagers did wash when they could. Herbal soaps existed. Steam baths too. But it wasn't about beauty. It was about not dying from infection, or lice, or public embarrassment. You sit by the firearms, clean hair damp the faintest scent of lavender wafting through your hovel. You feel human, until someone yells that the outhouse collapsed and needs rebuilding. Of course it did. You stare blankly at your doorway for a solid 30 seconds as if doing so might make the problem go away. It doesn't. The call rings out again, louder this time. The latrine's fallen in, the hole's full, the plank snapped, someone nearly drowned. And just like that, your moment of lavender-scented serenity is over. You rise with the aching resignation of someone who knows exactly what awaits a combination of mud excrement, panic, and poorly cut timber. You grab your tunic, still slightly damp from your soap ritual, and sigh. You were clean for 12 minutes. A personal record. Down at the village edge, near the cluster of leaning outhouses, a crowd has gathered. The ground is a mess of splinters, soggy earth, and human indignity. A young lad, possibly the Reeves' nephew, is being pulled from the latrine pit by two men holding their noses and one trying not to laugh. The boy is covered in shame and other things. Someone gestures to you. "We need builders. You've got strong hands. Do you?" You glance at your fingers, cracked, blistered, and shaking slightly. Sure, why not? You're handed a few planks, some nails bent into the shape of anxious worms, and a rope that looks like it's seen better centuries. The work begins. You remove the remnants of the collapsed seat, all while trying not to breathe too deeply. The stench is legendary, a sour, earthy fog that clings to your nose hairs and makes you question your life choices. One plank is still usable. The rest crumble like wet crackers. A new pit must be dug deeper this time, someone insists. So you dig. The earth is damp and uncooperative. Your shovel hits stone, then something worse. You don't ask questions. Half an hour later, you've got the pit. You line it with straw. You lay down new planks, nail them in, and pray to every saint you can name that it holds. Fun fact, scholars remain divided on whether medieval sanitation was universally terrible or just uneven. Some places had clever waste systems. Others, like your current project, simply relied on gravity, shame, and wishful thinking. As you work, a group of children gather nearby, giggling. One of them starts a song, "Who built the poop house?" He did. He did. You pretend not to hear. You are beyond shame. Finally, the job's done. A new latrine stands, proudly, barely tilting, mostly intact. You step back, wipe your brow with a sleeve that now smells like lavender and human waste, and declare it functional. The crowd disperses. No applause. Just mild grunts of approval, and a goat sneezing in your direction. You head home to change clothes. Again. Inside your hovel, has shifted slightly. The floor slants more than usual, probably due to the recent rain. Your straw bed has developed a moist corner. You toss your outer tunic over the beam to dry and collapse onto the least lumpy spot of straw staring at the ceiling. A knock. You groan. What now? It's your cousin. She bursts in without waiting, eyes wide. We need you. The apothecary is out of town and old Mara's rash is spreading. Of course it is. You follow her to Mara's hut where the old woman is lying on a creaky bench, fanning herself with a chicken feather. Her skin is blotchy red and vaguely alarming. She ate something, your cousin whispers. Possibly lichen. Or soap. They look at you, expectantly. You kneel beside Mara, examine the rash, trying not to breathe through your nose, and nod solemnly. She'll need mashed garlic, maybe a poultice. They scramble to find garlic. You say it with authority, even though you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. But it works, because this is medieval medicine, a blend of guesswork herbs and dramatic facial expressions. Your cousin returns with a clove. You mash it against a rock, smear it on a strip of cloth, and press it gently to the rash. Mara groans. Her eyes flutter. You have healing hands, she whispers. You smile modestly, mostly relieved that no one died yet. Experts still debate whether medieval folk medicine was more harmful than helpful, but it certainly got results. Sometimes because of the herbs. Sometimes because the patient just sweated it out. Often because they got lucky. Later you return home, hands still smelling of garlic and dirt. You sit by the hearth and stare into the coals, which are finally glowing again. Outside the wind picks up. A low howl echoes through the village. You pull your cloak tighter and think, today I built a toilet, saved a rash, got mocked by children, again, and somehow you're still here. The wind howls into the night, like a long drawn-out complaint from the sky itself. You sit by the flickering hearth cloak, pulled tight around your shoulders, listening to the wooden beams creak like tired bones. The garlic from earlier still lingers on your fingers. You've washed twice with cold water and scrubbed with dry straw, but it clings like your obligations. Outside, the village has quieted, save for the occasional gust rattling loose shutters or the distant bleat of a confused goat. You're thinking maybe, just maybe, you'll get a few hours of uninterrupted sleep. So naturally the knock on your door comes the moment you start to drift. A soft tap barely there. You open it to find your neighbor's youngest daughter standing barefoot in the mud, eyes wide, face pale. Mama says, come quick. They think you're cursed. You blink. Me. She nods solemnly. You smile during prayer. And just like that, you are now part of a potential witch hunt. You follow her through the darkened village, your footsteps squelching in mud that now feels colder and more judgmental. A small group has gathered in the town square, torches held high, their faces a blend of suspicion and mild confusion. At the center is the reeve holding what appears to be a chicken feather and a Bible. Well, he says when he sees you, someone's been bathing, smiling, fixing rashes, fixing latrines. That's a lot of fixing. Suspicious, don't you think? You squint? So, competence is suspicious now. A murmur of uncertainty ripples through the crowd. This is, after all, a place where surviving winter is considered showing off. The priest steps forward. No one's accusing anyone. But we must be cautious. These are dark times. Yes, dark, drafty, and mostly cabbage-flavored. Someone pipes up from the back. Didn't they say the devil uses soap? You try not to laugh, but it escapes just a small snort, which in this context is worse than a confession. The reeve raises an eyebrow. Is that amusement? At priestly concern, you quickly wipe the grin off your face and pivot into full medieval mode, hunched posture, mournful eyes, vague hand gestures. I'm but a humble servant of mud and garlic. My rash healing is purely accidental. The priest looks uncertain. The reeve looks annoyed. The village looks intrigued. Here's your scholarly tidbit: experts still debate whether medieval witch accusations were driven more by fear, power struggles, or garden variety boredom. What's clear is that hygiene independence, or a good joke at the wrong time, could make you suspect. They decide to test you. A chicken is brought forward. You're told to place your hand on its back. If it stays calm, you're pure. If it flaps well, you'll be sleeping in the stocks tonight. You approach the chicken like it's a loaded crossbow. It stares at you. You stare back. A drop of sweat trickles down your temple. Gently you place your hand on its back. It flaps, once, just once. Then it settles. The priest nods. The bird is satisfied. The reeve grunts. For now. The villagers scatter somewhat disappointed by the lack of a fiery trial. You meanwhile are left standing with chicken feathers stuck to your sleeve and a pulse that could churn butter. You head home in silence. Inside the fire has nearly gone out. You poke at it listlessly with a stick and collapse onto your straw bed, exhausted but also oddly proud. You survived a near witch accusation with a chicken test. That's a new one. As your eyes begin to close, your body finally giving in, you hear a whisper outside your window. You pass the bird, someone chuckles softly. You sit up with a start. Outside stands Agnes, the beekeeper's sister, draped in a thick wool shawl and smiling mysteriously. You know, she says some of us wouldn't mind a little cursed help around here. My brother's got warts, and the cat's been acting possessed. You stare. She winks. You've got a gift. Use it wisely. Just don't let the reeve catch you smiling again. She disappears into the mist. You collapse again. Your head sinks into the straw. The fire hisses low. The chicken feathers drift lazily through the smoky air. And as sleep finally takes you, one last thought drifts across your mind. You've become the village wizard. Accidentally. You awaken the next morning to the sound of bees. At first you think you're dreaming something gentle, maybe even peaceful for once. But know that buzzing is real and it's inside your hut. You sit up fast, a bit too fast, and whack your forehead on a low beam. The bees scatter. One lands on your nose. You go cross-eyed, trying to will it away. Finally, it buzzes off, offended. Stumbling outside in your wrinkled tunic, you find Agnes, the beekeeper's sister, crouched near your door, waving a smoking bundle of herbs and muttering something about cleansing the energy. "Oh, good," she says when she sees you. "You're up. The bees were just saying hello." You blink. The bees. She nods, completely serious. They like you. You stare at her then, at the haphazard swarm of bees now congregating around a flower pot near your window. Sure, that tracks. At this point, you'd be more surprised if bees didn't show up unannounced. Agnes rises and dusts off her skirts. "Also, I've told a few folks you might be spiritually gifted." She lowers her voice. "Don't worry," I phrased it carefully. "No one said witch." You groan internally. This is how it starts. One healing rash, one accidental bath, one overly calm chicken, and now you're the local hedge wizard with a fan club of insects. She leaves you with a small jar of honey and a cryptic nod. Your day hasn't even properly begun, and already it's sideways. You pocket the honey. It's probably safer than leaving it out. Toss some water on your face from a nearby jug, which is frozen on top, and chew the remaining heel of your mystery bread, now about as soft as a fence post. Then it's off to your next assigned duty, helping the Hayward round up stray livestock. The Hayward is a man of few words and fewer teeth. He's already standing near the sheep pen, tapping his stick against his boot, with the casual menace of someone who enjoys chasing disobedient animals. 2 sheep, 1 goat, all gone north, he mutters. You and he trudge up the frosty hill past patches of slushy ice and slippery stones. The goat is spotted first, halfway up a tree. How it got there, no one knows. How it intends to get down is even more mysterious. You attempt to coax it with a bit of hay. It stares at you. You speak softly. It sneezes. Then dramatically and without warning, it leaps not toward you but straight over your head and vanishes behind a bush. Goats the Hayward size. You eventually corral the goat and 1 sheep. The last sheep has joined a nun's procession, walking solemnly beside the sisters, as if it's found its spiritual calling. You retrieve it with as much reverence as you can manage, while apologizing to the abbess who scolds you gently for interrupting divine alignment. Back in the village, you're rewarded with a chunk of cheese, slightly moldy, deeply fragrant, and wrapped in a cabbage leaf. You eat half immediately. It's the best thing you've tasted in weeks. Mostly because it doesn't come with a side of existential dread. Cheese in hand, you pass the blacksmith's apprentice, struggling with a bent horseshoe. You offer help. He grunts and steps aside. Together, you reheat the iron, hammer it back into shape, and even manage to avoid setting anything on fire. A small crowd gathers. Someone murmurs, "See the hands of a healer and a smith." You freeze. It's happening again. The legend is building without your permission. And here's your historical tidbit: scholars remain divided on whether rural medieval communities truly believed in magic, or if they simply used gifted villagers as convenient scapegoats and unlikely heroes. If something went wrong, they'd burn you. If something went right, they'd praise you until it went wrong again. You try to downplay the forge moment. Just got lucky, you say, brushing soot from your sleeve. The blacksmith snorts. Luck don't shape steel. Great. By mid-afternoon, you've become the subject of 2 whispered rumors, 1 thank you loaf, and a suspicious nod from the priest. You retreat home, hoping to stay invisible for the rest of the day. But just as you settle in, there's a knock. Again. You sigh and open the door. It's a young woman holding an old book, one that looks dangerously readable. "Can you read?" she whispers. You hesitate. Lie, confess, laugh. Too late. She's already pushing the book into your hands. "I heard you helped that rash and fixed the forge. Maybe you can help with this too. It belonged to my grandfather. He said it was full of secrets." You glance down. Faded Latin. Tiny script. Margins filled with doodles of plants, stars, and cats. You nod slowly, already regretting it. Because in medieval times, nothing is more suspicious than knowing things. You sit by the hearth that night, the book open in your lap like a ticking bomb. Faded ink, browned edges. That faint, dusty smell of forgotten knowledge. It all radiates danger, especially in a village where reading is viewed with the same suspicion as not being lice-infested. The script is cramped but legible Latin mostly, but with strange symbols scattered between lines. Stars, moons, plant stems curling into spirals. You flip slowly, carefully, trying to look like someone not dabbling in sorcery while absolutely dabbling in sorcery. It's not a spell book, at least not in the theatrical lightning bolts kind of way. It's more like a field guide full of notes on herbs, remedies, and weather signs. One passage mentions soaking nettles to treat joint pain. Another describes when not to plant beans. And in the margins, someone, perhaps the original owner, has added thoughts like, "Tested this. Only made goats sleepy, and do not combine with ale." You're halfway through a page about poppy root when you hear a knock, of course. This time it's Elder, the woman who makes vinegar and complains about everything. "My husband's seeing visions again," she says flatly. "Thinks the moon is speaking to him. Come fix it." You follow her, slipping the book beneath your straw mattress like it might leak secrets if left unattended. Outside, the wind is sharp. Stars glitter above like someone spilled silver dust across black velvet. Elder's hut is smoky and full of jars, pickled things, floating things, things you do not want to ask about. Her husband Arno is sitting on a stool, wide-eyed and muttering, "She's up there. The moon's watching me." You try to piece it together. Fever, hallucination. Bad ale. Too much pickled turnip. You take his pulse. Clammy. His forehead warm. You sniff his breath. Ah. The culprit, spoiled cider. "Tell him to drink boiled water and sleep it off," you say. Elder looks skeptical. "That's it." You nod. "And maybe don't let him eat the blue pickles." She grunts, clearly disappointed you didn't chant or wave herbs dramatically. You consider faking a sneeze for flair but decide against it. Back outside, the stars seem closer than before. A soft owl hoot echoes. You're about to head home when you spot a figure at the edge of the village, the reeve, talking in hushed tones with a cloaked man. You freeze. "Listen. Still haven't found the thief. Lord Edmund's patience is thinning. Thief. Oh, right. The missing tax cart from days ago." You duck behind a woodpile, heart racing. The reeve grunts again. "If someone's hiding coin or goods, we'll know soon. No one can keep secrets here." You slip away silently, feet crunching frost. Back home, you retrieve the book. Flip to the back. There, tucked in the cover, is a folded slip of parchment. You unfold it slowly. It's a recipe to make a sleeping tonic, for pain or escape. Lavender, valerian, poppy, honey. You read it twice. It's not magic, but it feels like it. And here's your historical tidbit: experts still debate how much literacy existed among peasants. While church records and noble documents dominated, some villagers did read and write quietly, cautiously. Knowledge passed down in secret, often disguised as prayer or recipe. You light a candle and carefully copy the tonic into a scrap of cloth. Just in case. Then you hide the book again. Deep this time. Under the loose floorboard, wrapped in a rag and sealed with wax. You lie back, eyes open in the dark brain, humming with Latin herbs and the Reeves threats. Outside, a rooster crows way too early. Of course. You roll onto your side, whisper to no one. Moon, keep your gossip to yourself tonight. And drift off, wondering what else is hidden under straw and superstition in this village of yours. You're awoken not by chickens or rats this time, but by the distinct sound of someone whispering your name. You sit bolt upright, heart galloping. It's still dark, maybe an hour before dawn. The fire's gone cold. Outside, frost glints along the window's oiled parchment like someone smeared moonlight with a knife. You wait, breath held. Nothing. Then there it is again. A soft whisper. Hey, hey you, wise one. You shuffle to the door and open it a crack. Standing there, half hidden in the shadows, is Joran the potboy, eyes wide with urgency and mud up to his knees. Come quick, he hisses. It's the Lord's steward. He's sick. Like, twitching and talking to invisible people. You hesitate. Joran leans in. They said to fetch the healer, and they meant you. And just like that, you're on your feet, boots on, cloak wrapped, grabbing your pouch of herbs, your most legitimate-looking cloth and your best serious healer face. You're not sure if you're flattered or terrified. Both. Definitely both. Joran leads you up the winding path to the manor, a looming timber and stone monstrosity that smells like beeswax, wet wool and political tension. The last time you were here, you were throwing manure on the garden beds. Now you're being escorted inside by a boy who still picks his nose with confidence. The steward, a pale and puffy man named Osric, is laid out on a feather-stuffed pallet, convulsing gently, eyes rolling back, lips, mumbling nonsense. Two maids hover nearby. One clutches a crucifix. The other clutches a bucket. You kneel beside the bed trying to recall every page of that forbidden book, every whispered cure, every sensible thing you've ever seen a cow recover from. You examine him, sweating, trembling, breathing fast. And on the floor beside the bed, a half-eaten meat pie. You sniff it, sour. And is that mold, poison, spoilage, or just medieval cooking? Probably bad pork, you mutter. You reach into your pouch and pull out a small folded leaf packet. Inside, dried valerian root. You crush some into warm water, stir it with a carved spoon, and blow gently across the surface before pressing it to Osric's lips. He gurgles, spits some, swallows more. Everyone waits. The room is so silent you can hear someone's stomach gurgle 2 rooms over. Then, slowly, his twitching eases. His eyes stop rolling. He lets out a long, earthy belch and goes still. The room erupts in relieved gasps. A maid bursts into tears. Someone mutters something about a miracle. You sit back, hands still shaking, your brain racing faster than your pulse. You just saved a noble steward. That's either very good or very dangerous. And here's your historical tidbit. Scholars remain divided on the position of folk healers in medieval society. In one breath, they were miracle workers. In the next, they were heretics, depending on who was sick, who was watching, and who needed a scapegoat. The manor's seneschal enters the room tall-robed, clearly irritated to be awake. He sizes you up with the dead-eyed gaze of a man who counts grain for a living. You, he says, stay put. 2 guards step forward not to arrest you, but to escort you, gently, formally, as if you just accidentally became someone important. You're led to the great hall where the fire roars high and tapestries flap in the draught. Lord Edmund himself is not present, thankfully, but one of his cousins is, a round man in green robes who smells like rosewater and boredom. He offers you a cup of watered wine. So, you're the village wise one now. You cough. I'm just good at boiling things. He nods, unimpressed. And reading, you freeze. Number another nod. Too slow. I see. He waves a hand. You may return to your hovel, for now, but Lord Edmund will want to speak with you soon. You leave the manor walking backward, not from respect, but because you're afraid to turn your back on that grin. Outside, Joran walks you halfway home. That was amazing, he says. You made him stop shaking with plants. You don't answer. Your mind is spinning. You've crossed a line now. You're no longer just the peasant who doesn't die. When sick, you're the one they notice, and that in a village like this can end in firewood and rope. You get home and bolt the door. Crawl under the straw. Try to sleep. but your brain won't stop whispering. You fixed a noble. You're being watched. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, the book pulses like it knows you just stepped deeper into something you may not survive. Morning arrives like a slap from a wet boot, loud, sudden, and utterly disrespectful. A knock rattles your door, followed by someone shouting your name with the urgency of a town crier announcing a fire or free bread. You groan and sit up. Your bones creak like poorly built scaffolding. The memory of last night's events hits all at once. The steward, the poisoned pie, the nobles with too many questions and not enough patience. You open the door slowly, half expecting guards, torches, or a goose with a warrant. Instead, it's Breda the alewife. She's out of breath, flushed from either running or pure anxiety. It's old Henna. He's collapsed. His nose bled like a pig. He said your name. Come, please. You don't even put on both boots. You grab your bag, your thickest cloth, and a sliver of garlic, because at this point it's your version of a holy relic. Old Henny lives near the edge of the woods in a hut, so crooked it looks like it's wincing. When you arrive, he's slumped against his wall, eyes fluttering, lips, cracked cheeks, grey. You kneel beside him and quickly assess weak pulse, shallow breathing, and yes, a thin trail of dried blood under his nose. Breda wrings her hands. He said something about mushrooms. You spot a wooden bowl near the hearth, empty but sticky. The smell hits you earthy, strange and familiar from your studies. You sniff it again. Fly agaric, a red mushroom with white spots. Oh no, you whisper. Breda gasps. Is it a curse? No, you say. It's dinner. You quickly make a potion of milk and crushed charcoal, muttering under your breath for memory and focus. You help Henny drink it, coaxing each swallow with quiet, steady words. Eventually the colour begins to return to his face, and he whispers hoarsely, "Tell them not to eat the spotted ones." You nod solemnly. Noted. Outside, Breda hugs you. That was amazing. Again, then quieter. Do you teach? You blink. Teach. She nods, looking almost shy. You know things. Plants. Potions. People listen to you. I want to learn. It stops you cold. For a moment, you're not just a mud-streaked villager with an itchy tunic and a cursed talent. You're a teacher. Or could be. I don't know if I should, you mutter. Breda leans in. Better they learn from someone kind than from fear. You promise to think about it then. Return home, brain buzzing. Here's your scholarly tidbit expert still debate the informal education of medieval peasants. While formal schooling was rare, knowledge, especially medical or herbal, often passed quietly person to person, especially through midwives, herbalists, and those seen as touched by the saints or by something else. Back at your hovel, you sit beside the hearth and stare into the ashes. Your hands are still trembling from the rush of it all again. You rescued the steward. You stopped old Hen from bleeding into the next life. And now you've been asked to teach. This isn't farming anymore. This is something else. But just as your thoughts begin to spiral, a rock hits your door, hard. You open it to find a note tied to another rock. Unfolding the parchment, you read, "There are those who fear what you know. Be careful whom you trust. Some remember the old laws. There's no signature, no mark, just a smear of red wax." You step outside, heart pounding, and scan the empty lane. No one, just wind and chickens. You duck back inside and bolt the door, then go straight for the floorboard. The book is still there, still quiet, still dangerous. You flip it open. The pages flutter, like they're choosing something for you. It lands on a symbol you don't recognize, a circle inside a square flanked by leaves. The caption reads, "To protect against false judgment." You trace it slowly, commit it to memory, then close the book. There is no turning back now. You're not just surviving medieval life anymore. You're playing with fire, and maybe, just maybe, learning how to carry it. You sleep lightly that night, if you can even call it sleep. Your dreams are strange again. Visions of moons with eyes, goats, speaking in rhyme, and that same circle in a square symbol glowing faintly behind everything, like a quiet warning. When you wake, your mouth is dry, your neck stiff, and your knees unwilling to bend. But there's no time for stretching or second thoughts, because this morning the village square is abuzz. and not in the good way. A stranger has arrived. Tall, cloaked clean. Too clean. He stands near the well, arms folded, talking to the reeve with an expression that suggests he's never seen a mud road in his life. He wears soft leather boots, a red embroidered sash, and the unmistakable scent of someone who bathes with intention. You get one look and feel the shift immediately. This is not a merchant. This is someone from the city. Rumours swirl fast. Tax inspector, ecclesiastical envoy, a witch hunter. You hover near the bread stall, pretending to inspect loaves that look like they were baked under a rock slide, while your ears stretch toward the conversation. Yes, I've heard of the healer, the man says, voice crisp like dried leaves. Unlicensed, self-taught, possibly literate. The reeve nods far too eagerly. Your stomach drops. You rush home, shut the door, and sit very, very still. Your brain is a beehive now, buzzing, panic, conflicting strategies, and somewhere in the middle, a terrible calm. You knew this day would come. You just didn't think it would be today. You reach under the floor, pull out the book, and open to a page, marked with a dog-eared corner, Charms for Obscurity. It's not a spell exactly, just a recipe as usual. Mugwort crushed walnut husks, soot, burned together. The note reads, "For those who need to pass unnoticed." You glance around. You have some mugwort. Walnut husks, no, but acorn shells are similar. Soot, well, you've got plenty of that. You grind, you mix, you burn it in a tiny clay dish, letting the smoke swirl gently around the doorway and windows. It smells like the back of a forest. You say nothing. Just breathe it in. Here's your quirky tidbit: many medieval folk relied on smoke rituals for more than just warmth. Some thought it cleared bad spirits. Others believed it could blur intention, make one less noticeable to hostile eyes. Scholars remain divided on whether it worked. But today you don't have the luxury of skepticism. There's a knock, not sharp. Polite. You open the door to find Breda nervously clutching a cloth bundle. "He's here for you," she whispers. "I know. I told him you were out. But he'll be back. He's asking questions. About the book. About what you read. About what you fixed." You take the bundle from her. Inside an inkpot and quill. "He left this at the tavern," she says. "The barmaid said he writes reports after every meeting. Even priests. Especially healers." You nod silent. "Are you leaving?" she asks. You want to. Every cell in your body screams for it. But something inside holds you still. You glance around your tiny hovel at the tools you've used to mend bones and patch souls. At the straw where you dreamed of oranges and forgot what silence feels like. "No," you say softly. "Not yet," Breda nods. Then, "Teach me today." You pause. Then, "Yes." You light a second candle. You show her how to crush valerian root, how to mix honey and crushed mint for fever, how to recognize the difference between a healing mushroom and a hallucination with teeth. She's a fast learner. You feel something shift in your chest. Not fear, not pride. Something older. Continuity. And here's your historical fact. While formal universities were the realm of elite men, medical knowledge among women and laypeople traveled by word, by hand, by careful observation, quietly, relentlessly. You teach until dusk. As Breda leaves, she whispers, "I'll tell no one, but I'll remember everything." You sit by the hearth, staring into the flickering orange light. You haven't run. You haven't burned the book. You've planted something instead. And when the stranger knocks again tomorrow, maybe you'll open the door with open eyes, not as a healer, not as a witch, but as something that doesn't quite exist in their records. A survivor. The next morning arrives dressed in fog and silence. Even the chickens seem unsure of themselves. They cluck quietly, like they too sense that something is off. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm or an inquisition. You sit at your table, sipping weak broth made from dried roots and leftover cabbage. It tastes like paper soaked in regret, but it's warm, and warmth is something. Then right on cue comes the knock. Not panicked, not timid, just official. You open the door to find the stranger standing there, backlit by grey morning light. He looks more out of place than ever. Polished boots now dusted with village muck, a red wax seal dangling from his belt, and eyes like cold steel softened only by curiosity. "I am Brother Thorn," he says. "I'd like to speak with you." You gesture him in because pretending not to be home only works when you don't make eye contact. He steps inside. His gaze immediately scans the space. Pausing on the hearth, the herb bundles the faint smell of lavender and soot. "You live simply," he remarks. It's the fashion, you say. He almost smiles. He takes a small book from his satchel and opens it, dipping a quill into his travelling inkwell. Your name, you tell him. He writes. Occupation. You pause. Labourer. Then add, sometimes I help people. He doesn't look up. Unlicensed healer. You swallow. People come to me. I don't call myself anything. He nods, non-committally. What do you know of herbs? You shrug. What doesn't kill people? What might help them? I watch. I try things. He jots that down too. Have you ever received formal instruction number? But you read. A pause. A little. He looks up now, directly at you. From where did you learn? Your heart thuds. You consider lying, then realize every answer is a trap. Finally you say, an old book, found in a barn. Most of its recipes. He leans back. That would technically be possession of a prohibited manuscript. You meet his gaze. Technically so is knowing Latin if you're not clergy. Silence. He sets down his pen. You treated Lord Edmund's steward. You've cured children, eased fevers, repaired wounds. There are people here who call you a blessing. You feel the butt coming like a cart with a broken axle. But others say you speak to bees, that you commune with nature, that you read signs in fire and dream of things not yet happened. You shrug again. I dream of bread more often than the future. His expression doesn't change. You understand why I must ask, are you a practitioner? Of what he raises an eyebrow. You sigh. I mix herbs. I boil water. I stop people from dying of stupid things. If that's a crime, write it down. Here's your historical tidbit. The line between healer and heretic was razor thin. Scholars remain divided on how much power church officials held over rural medicine, but they agree on this. If someone saved lives without scripture, suspicion followed. Brother Thorn watches you for a long moment, then closes his book slowly. No scripture on the walls, no pagan symbols. He nods toward the coals. No ashes of goat's blood, no feathers from black birds. You deadpan, I try to keep the goat blood outdoors. That earns a real smile. He stands. I will report no wrongdoing. You breathe just slightly. But be cautious, he says, as he adjusts his cloak. Power in unclaimed hands always draws fire. Not because it's wrong, but because it's uncontrolled. He opens the door. Fog swirls in. Then softer. There are more like you than you think. You just need to know where to look. And just like that, he's gone. You close the door gently, your hands trembling. You didn't lie. You didn't confess. And somehow, you're still standing. Outside, a breeze kicks up. The scent of early spring damp earth thawing fields. And the faintest trace of mint whispers through your broken window. You return to your hearth, where a pot of hot water begins to boil. You toss in a sprig of something green and healing. Let it steep. Then, as if nothing happened, you reach for the book and begin to read. The days that follow move strangely. Quiet, but not calm. Like everyone is waiting for something to happen, but no one's quite sure what. You go about your routine splitting wood, checking on old Mara's rash, which has now faded to a polite pink, helping Breeder identify a strange root from the woods. It was thankfully not hemlock. You nod to the baker. He nods back. The Reeve watches you pass. He doesn't scowl, but he doesn't blink either. And always in the back of your mind there's the faint echo of Brother Thorn's words. Power in unclaimed hands always draws fire. Still no torches, no mobs, no ropes. Just questions. Breeder visits again. This time she brings her younger sister nervous, curious eyes full of wanting to know more. You show them both how to dry nettles properly, how to make onion poultices for swelling, how to identify good moss from that moss that makes your skin go numb and your thoughts get weird. Word is spreading, but it's not loud. It's whispered. And somehow that's worse. Then 3 mornings later, a new kind of knock. Not a polite one, not an urgent one. A slow, measured thump, followed by another. Heavy, deliberate. You open the door to find Sir Aldrich, the manor's head guard, standing with arms crossed and a look that suggests he hasn't smiled since he learned how to swing a sword. The Lord wants you at the manor, he says. You don't ask why. You simply go. The walk is quiet, no conversation. Just the sound of your boots on frost-crusted mud and the metallic jingle of Aldrich's armour. Inside the manor, The air smells like rosemary and power. You're led into a side chamber, smaller than the great hall, but still intimidating with its carved chairs, embroidered tapestries, and tall slitted windows that always seem to let in cold, disapproving light. Seated at the head of the table, Lord Edmund. He's younger than you expected, clean-shaven, sharp-eyed, not cruel-looking, but very, very alert, the kind of man who hears everything even if you never said it. "Sit," he says. You do. A pause. Then, "You helped my steward." "Yes. You mended his fever, settled his fits, identified the problem faster than my personal physician." You swallow. Nod. "That physician," he adds, "is no longer employed." You try not to react. Another pause. "Tell me, healer, do you know why some nobles burn people like you?" Your stomach tightens. "Because we're afraid," he answers himself. "Not of curses, not of demons, but of competence." He leans forward. Incompetence is predictable. People who fail consistently are useful. They stay in their place. But someone like you, with knowledge but no title, respect but no land, power but no name. He shrugs. You disrupt the order. You whisper, "I didn't ask for power." "No," he agrees. "You earned it." Silence. "Then I have a proposal." You blink. "I want you to stay. Continue healing. Quietly. No public spectacles. No gatherings. No sermons disguised as instruction. I'll protect you, but you will belong to me." It isn't framed as a threat. It's not even cold. It's worse. It's a choice. Here's your historical context. Scholars remain divided on the autonomy of wise folk under noble patronage. Some thrived, hidden under the wing of wealthy houses. Others disappeared the moment they stopped being useful. Always dependent, never free. You take a breath. Then slowly you say, "I'll help who needs helping. But I'm not yours." Lord Edmund's gaze sharpens. Just slightly, then he smiles. It doesn't reach his eyes. "Very well, you're dismissed. No guards escort you this time. Just that long, cold hallway and the knowledge that you've now refused both fire and a collar. Back home the hearth is still warm. The book still sleeps beneath the floor. Breda's sister left you a sprig of rosemary on the door, an old sign of loyalty or warning. You sit, you stir the pot, you write your own notes in a corner scrap of parchment, careful and neat. And just before you drift to sleep, you whisper to the fire. No one owns a wind that knows how to burn. The next day breaks without birdsong. Just wind. That strange, sharp kind that whistles under doors and between shutters like the world itself is trying to tell you something it can't quite say aloud. You rise, early. Not because you want to, but because your door won't stop rattling. Something's off. You feel it before your feet even hit the straw. You stoke the hearth, pour water, check your herbs and freeze. The sprig of rosemary Breda left yesterday. It's gone. In its place, a charred stem still warm. You step outside and find a scrap of parchment pinned to your door with a sliver of bone. No words. Just a symbol. A circle. A square. A flame. It's the same one from the book. You spin around scanning the village, but no one's watching, at least not openly. You go straight to the floorboard, retrieve the book, and flip through it until your fingers find the right page. The protective charm, meant to shield the bearer from false judgment. The margins now have smudges that weren't there before. Someone's touched it, or copied it. You sit still for a long moment. Then you move. You pack what little you have, dried roots, a folded cloth, a shard of soap, one last hunk of cheese, and you leave your hut behind. Not to run, not to hide, but to find answers. You head for the old granary abandoned since last year's roof collapse. Rumour said it was haunted, which made it the perfect place for quiet meetings. Sure enough, Breda's already there, along with 3 others. The butcher's eldest, a stable girl with ink-stained fingers, and old Tomas who hasn't spoken in years, but who now looks at you and nods like you're part of a plan you didn't know existed. Breda lifts her chin. It's not just you. You blink. "What, all of us?" she says. "We've read, learned, some more than others. We've kept quiet. We've survived. But this village is waking up, and they're scared of it." You lower your voice. "Why me?" "Because you didn't hide." Old Tomas opens a small cloth bundle and sets it down inside another book. Faded, frayed, filled with notes and scribbles. A twin to yours. Breeder explains. There's more than one. We've been collecting them, hiding them. Some from old monks, some from travelers, pieces of lost knowing. You suddenly feel very small and very not alone. Here's your historical fact. Scholars remain divided on how much informal learning circulated among commoners. But what they do agree on is this books had lives beyond monasteries. Quietly copied, secretly stored, passed hand to hand like smuggled light. We want to preserve them, Breeder says. To teach, to protect. But we need someone to lead. You laugh. Me, you're already doing it, she says. Even if you didn't mean to. You look around the granary. It smells like dust and memory. A broken window lets in a single shaft of light. Dust swirls through it like dancing secrets. You nod slowly, and just then the door creaks. Everyone jumps. A figure steps inside the stranger, Brother Thorn. But he doesn't raise a hand. He doesn't shout. He simply closes the door behind him and says, "You'll need more ink." You blink. You knew I suspected. But now I've seen enough. He removes a scroll from his sleeve, unrolls it on the cracked table. It's a map marked with dots, villages, abbey ruins, forest paths, hidden places. Others, he says, people like you, like us. The room is silent. The fire of something ancient stirs between you all. You trace the map with a fingertip. The future isn't written, but the parchment is real, and so are you. For the first time you say it aloud, "I'll teach." You return to the village just before dusk, the map hidden beneath your cloak, the words still echoing in your chest, "I'll teach." Somehow it feels heavier than any oath you've ever taken, because it wasn't given under duress or by accident. You meant it. You pass the reeve in the lane. He gives you that same unreadable look, half suspicion, half distraction, but says nothing. You nod politely like you're still just a helpful peasant. And in a way you are, but now you're something else too. Back in your hovel, the fire's out, the coals are cold. The air inside has that stale, slumped quality of a space that knows its best secrets are now elsewhere. You don't relight the hearth. You sit in the silence and pull the book from the floorboards one last time. It's not a secret anymore, not a burden. It's a beginning. You flip through the pages not to read, but to remember. The first page you ever understood. The margin notes that made you laugh. The diagram of a lung drawn awkwardly but lovingly. The ink stain shaped like a duck that you refused to blot out because it felt like a friend. And here's your final scholarly tidbit. The jury's out on whether knowledge alone can change the course of history. But those who tried to pass it on page by page, whisper by whisper, nearly always did. A tap at your door. It's Breeder. No words. Just a nod. You follow her. Across the muddy square. Past the chapel, its bell sleeping quietly for once. Through the shadows cast by the leaning houses and the wind-nudged trees. Until you arrive at the granary again. Only now, the broken roof is half thatched. There's straw on the floor and candles flickering along the walls. Inside, 8 people. Not just the 3 from before. The carpenter's son, a widowed midwife, the baker's apprentice, even Elder Vinegar-hearted and sharp-tongued, who once swore you were cursed, now sits beside a bundle of herbs, eyes wide, hands folded. They've come. You lay the book gently on the table. The others open theirs. A patchwork of different sizes, languages, stains. No single truth, just collected knowledge. Someone begins to read aloud. Another copies. A child sketches a route. Breeder corrects her gently. Elder scoffs, then shows her how to label properly. The room fills with soft, careful voices. You don't lead from the front. You move quietly, helping, nodding, guiding. Because this isn't about being the one who knows. It's about being the one who helps others remember they can. Hours pass like minutes. You lose time. You gain something else. And at one point, when everyone is bent over a shared scroll whispering about how to stop bleeding with dried moss and pressure, you step outside. The moon is high. The air is still. And for the first time in, maybe ever, you feel the weight in your chest not as a threat, but as a purpose. You're not just surviving this world anymore. You're shaping it, quietly, gently, one line of ink at a time. You wake up early again, but this time not because of knocks or rats or shouts about runaway pigs. Number. This morning, you wake up because you want to, because something has shifted, not just inside your bones, but across the whole village. You light the hearth. Not out of habit, but with care. You boil water-grind herbs and lay them out neatly, patiently, like a teacher preparing for her first day. And in a way, you are. The granary now has a door latch. Breeder's brother installed it yesterday. The midwife stitched curtains from old flour sacks. Even the reeve, though he pretends not to notice, hasn't complained about the flickering candlelight that glows in the broken windows each evening. You walk there now, basket in hand, filled with dried nettle garlic, a wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth. Not as a healer, not as a heretic, just as you. Inside the space is alive. Whispers, scribbles, the soft clink of spoons stirring poultices. Thomas, the once silent elder, is reading a passage about willow bark, out loud. The child beside him is writing it down, every word, even the ones he mispronounces. Elder corrects his Latin with theatrical sighs. No one minds. Breeder brings you a note, folded, creased. You open it. It's from Brother Thorn. There are more of us than there are of them. Always have been. Always will be. Yours, in the quiet. You smile. Just a little. Outside, a boy bursts in with a scraped knee and a dramatic story about falling off a pig. He's barely hurt, but clearly hoping for a bandage and some attention. You give him both, and here's your final historical note. Scholars remain divided on how the deepest shifts in human history begin. Some say with wars, others say with inventions. But more and more agree that often it starts with something quieter. A conversation, a copied word, a woman who says, "I'll teach." You gather the group. You pass out the scrap parchment you've saved. You read from the book not as a spell, not as gospel, but as knowledge meant to be shared. And as the fire crackles and the sky outside begins to dim once more, you lean back and look around. This is not a cathedral. It is not a hall. It is not a school. But it is enough. You survived medieval times. And somehow you helped others do the same. You'll never be in the history books. But you've written your page. In ink, in breath, in the steady flickering light of shared knowing. Now soften your breath. Let the smoke of the hearth curl around your ribs. Let your hands fall loose. Let your eyes drift. You are safe now. The past is still. The fire is warm. The wind outside has quieted. The world waits gently. And you can finally rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.